Good afternoon, everybody. How are you today?
Outstanding.
I love outstanding. That's great. So we are doing a part 2 today. Who's excited about that? Yeah. Because we had so much fun last week that we want to continue it. Last week we learned tactics. And we learned how to control conversations. We learned how to not steamroller over people. We learned all kinds of stuff. But I want to review. Before we go too much further, I want to review. And I don't want to just review what we learned last week. I want to review a few weeks back. What scares us about sharing our faith with people? What do you think? What scares you? Yes, Sam.
Losing connections with people.
Losing connections. Well, yep.
Messing up and being disproven yourself.
Messing up and being disproven yourself. Oh, what happens if I end up they disprove me? So, with that said, I want to show you a small clip from a very intellectual show. I want to tell you ahead of time, this is very scary. So what you're about to see probably won't happen to you, but I want you to be prepared that it might. Okay?
That's why sharing is scary.
That sonata may not be a Glenn Gould performance, but I must say it's good as Gould.
Hey, Flanders, heading for church? Well, I thought I could save you a little time.
Ooh, found a new shortcut.
Better. I was working on a flat tax proposal, and I accidentally proved there's no God.
We'll just see about that. Uh-oh. Well, maybe he made a mistake. Nope. It's airtight. Can't let this little doozy get out.
Okay. Scary, huh? Somebody might disprove God. Like they might say, oh, I was working on a flat tax proposal, and I was doing some mathematical equations, and there's no God. Now, because you guys are all smarty pantses, or smarty, I don't know, dresses, why is it impossible for Homer to disprove God with a scientific equation? Okay, somebody else. Yes, Hannah.
Because God is...
Or not Hannah.
Because God is spiritual, so you can't measure him just by physical.
That's right. That's right. Science can only observe physical things, what you can touch, like your body and your soul, and they have to do things over and over and over again in experiments. You have to do double-blind studies, and other people have to do it too, and you have to do that. And that's not the type of thing that proves or disproves God, and yet people throw that at us all the time. People will always say, well, science doesn't prove God. And
It's true.
Yeah, it's true. If you mean the scientific method, it doesn't. What they're trying to do, I mean, because God is not physical, God is spirit. What they're trying to do is they're trying to weigh a chicken with a tape measure. And you can't do that. Well, some of you try, but you can't do that. It's a different thing. There's lots of things that the scientific method can't prove. The scientific method can't prove that George Washington was the first president of the United States, because you can't do that over and over and over again. What you do is you look at documents, you look at monuments, you look at you look at history, and you can deduce that it was the case. Yes, he was the first president of the United States. And you can also deduce that he probably never chopped down a cherry tree and said, "My father, I cannot tell a lie." Because this is how you look at those kind of things. So there are proof or evidences for God, but there are different types. There's archaeological evidence, there's ontological evidence, there's psychological evidence, there's all different types of evidences. The evidence of the resurrection, which we're going to get into soon. There's all kinds of stuff, there's probability, there's all kinds of neat stuff. But the whole like, hey, I did a math equation and there's no God, like we did with Flanders there, that's like weighing a chicken with a yardstick. It just doesn't work that way. So that's not going to happen. So I want you guys not to be afraid. It's not going to happen. You notice how like they had Flanders, the quote-unquote Christian guy, like burn the evidence? Like they always show like Christians being hypocrites in TV shows. Like it's always the case. Like, you know, because as a Christian, if I really, really, really believed that there was no God, I'd just stop being a Christian. I wouldn't like burn the evidence to, because I have to be a fake Christian now and I can't let anyone know. Like it's just be prepared for that. As you go out through the world, whenever you see a Christian in media, they're always the murderer. Every time. Like, they're the hypocrites. If you're watching Law and Order or something, and you're trying to figure out who the bad guy is, if there's ever somebody reading a Bible a lot, yeah, they're going to make him the bad guy. What, Sam?
So is the Android user, because Apple does not license their phones for villains to use.
Really? Wow, Apple does not license their phones for villains to use. And yet they're quite a villainous company themselves, aren't they? Hypocrites. Hypocrites. All right. So, to sum up what we've learned so far, what are the two main questions that we could always ask somebody when they say something? What's the first one? Everybody shout it out.
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that? That's a great question. What do you mean by that? And when you ask somebody, what do you mean by that, you're finding out what they're thinking. Because sometimes we use the same words and they mean different things. Even the word God. You'd think that, you got a bunch of people in the room and we all use the word God. It's only 3 little letters. You'd think that we'd all agree on what that is, but no, we won't. Some people think of God as this harsh, person in the sky who doesn't really care about you that much and he's just ready to pounce on you at any time. Some people think of God as a Santa Claus figure. Oh, do whatever you want, I don't care. What do you mean by that is a great question to ask, because very often we don't mean the same thing. We looked at hell a few weeks ago, and I put a Far Side comic up there. But it made the point. A lot of people think when they think of the word hell, they're not thinking about the biblical definition of it. So what do you mean by that? You find out what the person is thinking, and then what's the next question? Anybody know? Remember the next question?
How did you come to that conclusion?
How did you come to that conclusion? And that tells you not only what are they thinking, but how they came to believe that. And again, you don't have to use these words exactly, but they're good questions. And if you missed last week, it's on YouTube. Go to apologetics.great-news.org. You can watch it. I think I went over time. I'll try not to do that again today. But I get excited, and some people ask a lot of questions. So, nobody in particular.
What do you mean by that?
I mean Sam. The power of asking good questions is great. Because when you ask good questions, it gets people to think about what they're saying. Because honestly, a lot of times, especially in apologetics, people really aren't thinking. Most of the unbelievers that I meet, they have no idea why they're an unbeliever. They have no, seriously, they have not thought it through. They've not considered evidence. Oh yeah, I think Jesus is just a nice guy that taught good things, but I don't think he actually did any miracles. They haven't looked into that. Well, I think the Bible's been translated so many times it's unreliable. It's not anything like the original anymore. They haven't looked into that. I think the church just picked books that suppressed women and suppressed homosexuals, and I think this happened, and this is the way people haven't looked into that. So when you ask good questions, it makes them do the work. It puts the burden of proof back on the other person, which is always a good thing to do. Not as a jerky thing, but as a loving thing. You want them to think it through. Before I got saved, I had strong opinions about Jesus. I hated him. I didn't want anything to do with him. I thought he was terrible. I told my Christian friend that. Jesus is horrible. And he asked me, he basically asked me, how did you come to learn that? I don't think he used those words. And I said to him, I don't know. I never really, he's like, what in the Bible did you find horrible about him? And I said, I don't know, I've never read it. That's very typical of the type of people I meet. I meet people like how I was. Maybe that's why I don't get so mad at them, because I know that's the way I was. And God saved me. So if he can save me, he can save anybody. But a lot of people really haven't thought it through. When you ask questions, it gets them to see that. And you might even run into a smarty pants that knows a lot, and that's fine too. Then you'll learn something. So asking questions is great. It also makes you look interested, which you are, because you're a nice human being. You've been brought up well, so you are interested in the person. Yeah, Liberty, it's okay. You can just get up and leave whenever you want. It's fine. Oh, she's back. Everybody give her a round of applause. All right, I get it. I love to pick on my favorites. The power of asking good questions is really important. And one of the best people at asking good questions was Detective Columbo. So who here has watched Detective Columbo?
Oh.
There you go. You're very old.
Oh, yeah.
You're much older than you look.
Every old movie ever made.
So Detective Columbo was sort of, well, I'll let Greg Kokel explain. So a lot of what we're learning today and last week comes from an excellent book called Tactics by Greg Kokel. So I have a little video of Greg Kokel here, and he's going to share Detective Columbo with you, and hopefully you'll like it. Oh, you know what? Wrong video. I forgot which one was first. I made a mistake. Okay, we're going to see a testimony of a gentleman who got saved. He's actually sort of reminds me of somebody I know a little bit. But I didn't put this video in. My friend Aaron did. He picked it So don't think that I picked this. But what's interesting about this conversion story is that God used a lot of questions, a very inquisitive person, to reach this person for Jesus Christ. So when this gentleman shares his testimony, I want you to pay particular attention to the questions that are asked of him, because it's good stuff. Okay? You guys can do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you how you came to that conclusion. All right, so listen to what this guy has to say. In particular, pay attention to the questions that were asked of him.
I will never believe in Jesus. I was born a Jew. I will die a Jew. How can you expect me to believe in a God whose name my people have been killed? I don't care if it's true. I will never believe in Jesus. I grew up in a loving Jewish family. My mom and dad were very actively involved in the local synagogue, and we were there pretty much every Friday or Saturday. We celebrated the holidays at shul. We celebrated Passover at home. And my Jewish identity meant a lot to me growing up. I decided to go to college, where I majored in fashion photography. And then after I worked in the photo industry for a couple of years, I decided to fulfill my lifelong passion of learning how to ski. I drove myself to Aspen, Colorado, where I knew no one, got a season pass, and started skiing. Aspen was heaven on earth, and that's where I wanted to live the rest of my life. And so it was there during my second ski season that I met a young woman from Kansas City, Missouri, perhaps the most curious person I've ever met in my life. In fact, she has a journalism degree from the University of Missouri. She began talking to me about her faith in God. And she told me that she was a Christian. And I said, "Oh, that's nice, I'm Jewish." She kept asking me questions. "Do you believe in God?" "Yeah, I believe in God." And she said, "Well, what's he like? Is he righteous? And is he holy?" "What? What do you mean, what's he like?" And I said, he's other, and we're here, we're down here. He's infinite, we're finite. She kept asking me questions and about God and about what I believed about God and why I believed it. And the more questions that she asked me, the more upset I would become with her. I would get angry with her. "How can you expect me to believe in a God whose name my people have been killed for 2,000 years? She appeared to me as being narrow-mindedly dogmatic. But it was over time, as she asked me questions about what I believed and why I believed it, it began to occur to me that maybe I was the one who was narrow-minded and dogmatic. I knew Jews don't believe in Jesus. I knew you can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus. But the more she pressed me to explain why those things were true, the more I realized I didn't know, other than because. After she left, I decided, well, I'm going to start reading the Bible for myself to see what it says. And so, of course, I wouldn't go anywhere near the New Testament because I knew for a fact that the New Testament was Goyish Bubamaisis. It was Gentile grandmother stories. And everybody knew it was anti-Semitic, and so I would have nothing to do with that. What I discovered was that the God of this woman was my God, was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That really touched me. It really challenged me inside because it made me realize that I didn't know my own God, or at least I didn't know much about him. As I read more of the Bible, I began thinking more about my relationship with God. And I got to a point where I actually started to pray personally, like talk to God. God, if Jesus is the Messiah and you want me to put my faith in him, then I'm willing to do that, but only if it's true, because if it's not true, the last thing I want to do now is to worship a man and be an idol worshiper. I began to really think about what it meant for me to become a believer in Jesus. You know, what would my parents think? And what would my brothers think? What would my aunts and my uncles and my cousins, what would 90% of my friends, at least my friends from New York, think? It was like I was thinking about this, and it was as if I heard a voice in my head say to me, Danny, that's right. The choice is between following me and everyone and everything else. If God is God, He's boss. You do what He says, and if there's a cost involved, it's worth it. This woman came back at the end of the summer, and she brought with her, when she came back, she brought with her a book that a friend of hers, her best friend, had given to her. And the title of the book, you ready for this? The title of the book was, What's a Nice Jewish Boy Like You Doing in the First Baptist Church? All of the questions I kind of had floating around in my head that I wasn't willing to ask directly were addressed in the book. Jesus was Jewish, and the apostles were Jewish, and all of the New Covenant, the New Testament books were written by Jews. To this point, I had never still opened the New Testament scriptures. But reading this book, I began to read them for myself for the first time. I grew up in a neighborhood that was mixed Jewish, mostly Jewish and a lot of Catholic kids. And so for me, Jesus and the New Testament was associated with those kids and the hatred that I got from them. And I was shocked to discover the exact opposite. I discovered a Jewish man addressing Jewish topics in a Jewish way who taught love for your enemies, love for all people, not the kind of hatred that I saw. And this Jesus, who was the God of the Gentiles who hated the Jews, began to evaporate because He didn't exist. I finished the book, and she says to me, "So what did you think of the book?" I thought for a minute, and I said, "It was good. I liked it. I think it's going to help me explain some things to my parents." And she was completely taken off guard, and she said, "You mean you believe that Jesus is the promised Messiah of Israel?" And I said, "Yeah." She says, "Now you believe that He died on a Roman cross as a payment for your sin?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "And you believe that by trusting in Him and what He did for you on that cross, your sins are forgiven and you have new life with God?" And I said, "Yeah." You may be wondering about the identity of this very curious shiksa from Kansas City, this journalist who had such a profound impact on my life. And yes, what you are guessing is true. I chased her for another 1.5 years until she caught me, and we have been happily married for almost 39 years. After I had come to faith in Jesus, it took me a few months to build the nerve to tell my parents about it because I knew it would be hard for them. My mother's response was just classic. "Don't talk to me about Jesus. Don't tell me about Him. I will never believe in Jesus. I was born a Jew. I will die a Jew. I don't care if it's true. I will never believe in Jesus." You gotta love God's tenacity with His people. Even as He sent someone into my life to tell me about Messiah, it was people who knew Messiah who helped my mother come to faith at the age of 86 years of age. And I had the most awesome privilege of leading my mom to faith in Messiah.
That's pretty cool. Did you notice the questions that she asked him? Yeah.
She asked him questions that led to him questioning that the God that he hates exists. And then after he realized that God does not exist, she asked him questions that got him to believe biblical beliefs.
Yeah. So the questions are very, there's very little that's more offensive to a Jewish person, an unsaved Jewish person, than to talk about Jesus. So you want to get a Jewish person really mad at you, you talk about Jesus. And yet, by her asking questions, it removed some of the offense, didn't it? Excuse me. It also got him thinking. And he called her inquisitive. And that's, I want people to call us inquisitive. We should be inquisitive. We should be asking people questions. It's a great thing. It put the burden of proof on him. It got him to read it and learn about it and to open that New Testament that he thought would be so hateful. Because, the Roman Catholic kids in his neighborhood made fun of him as a kid, so that he just assumed the New Testament would be hateful. But then when he read it, he realized, well, this isn't hateful at all. Because asking questions exposes that we don't know things for sure. That happens a lot. When people ask questions, it's like, yeah, maybe I didn't know what I thought I knew. So I want you guys to be good question askers. Yes?
She asked him questions based on their commonality, because she asked him about God, which wasn't offensive because he believed in God.
Yes, yeah, she saw common ground. That goes back a couple weeks when we saw the video of the Christian man and the atheist girl, and how we talked about, the importance of finding common ground. Absolutely, and it's not that hard to do because we're all human and we have a lot in common. We really do. So when listening to an unbeliever, what I want you to do, A, is ask yourself if the person's conclusion is justified by the evidence he gives. My conclusion, the New Testament is not for Jews to read because it's filled with anti-Semitic junk. That's a conclusion. Everybody knows what a conclusion is, right? That's something that you've decided is the case. And it's supposed to come from premises. And the way we judge a conclusion is, do the premises follow? Does it logically follow to a conclusion? Yeah.
And then if we don't have enough information to keep the conversation going, we let it die a natural death and make it a learning experience.
Negative candy for you, yeah. Yes, very good. You can read ahead a little bit. That's well done.
Yeah, look at your eyes the whole time.
Hey, appreciate it. Very good. Okay.
Thanks, man.
Would somebody beat him up in the parking lot afterwards? Just that? Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yes, you may.
I'll do something else.
People are going to say all kinds of things. People are going to say that, Christianity is anti-women. It's misogynistic. And, when you say, well, how do you know that to be true? What they're going to do is they're going to give you their evidence. And ask yourself if their evidence, actually leads to their conclusion. And that's something that you can do. Or, sometimes, if you find you don't have the resources to take the conversation further, sometimes it's like, I don't know, they're going to bring something up that you don't even know. Well, don't you know that the Dead Sea Scrolls was recently translated and they found blah, 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 blah. And you're going to be like, I didn't know that. And that's okay. That's okay. You don't have to be all-knowing. God is all-knowing. You are not. God uses you as an ambassador, but you are not a perfect ambassador. Only Jesus was. We are not perfect ambassadors. So sometimes we don't know. Sometimes they're making things up too. But sometimes we don't know, and it's okay. You know what's worse than saying I don't know is trying to con your way into coming across like you do know when you don't. Don't do that. It's bad. It's against your integrity. It's not true. And it's just better to be honest with someone and say, you know what, I got to tell you, I don't know about that. I didn't know that. You obviously know more than me about that subject. It's okay to say that. It really is. I think it will, every time I've done that, the 3 times in my life that I didn't know something. I'm kidding. Every time I've done that, I think it actually creates a bond between the person I'm talking to. They're like, oh, I can trust this guy. He admits that he doesn't know. And that's fine. It's really okay. You don't God is all-knowing, you are not. Now, you guys are homeschoolers, so you know a lot, but you don't know that much. I mean, if I need to know how to make a quill and make ink out of berries, I'm going to you guys. But there are plenty of things that you don't know, and it's okay to admit that. You can let the conversation die a natural death, make it a learning experience, or better yet, tell him or her you don't know the answer, and give an invitation to talk again. That's even better. I love that. I was meeting with a student this fall because he asked some good questions. I said, let's chat, let's get some coffee. And I did something that's very scary. I asked for his email address and phone number. That's scary for me to do. This is what I do for a living. It still scares me to do that. But, he didn't freak out and go, stranger danger, get out of my cube. He didn't do that. He just said, okay. And we did meet a few times and we had some good conversation. So it's okay to do that. Guys, girls, be smart. If you're with opposite gender, don't be given phone number, and don't be, okay, I'll meet you in your room. No, we're not doing that. Meet at a coffee place, bring somebody else with you. Yeah.
What does it mean to let it die natural death? How do you do that?
Someone brings up something, oh, didn't you see the latest Discovery Channel documentary that Mary Magdalene was married to Jesus and they had kids and all this, and they found this, they made some sort of crazy assertion, but clearly you don't know about that, you didn't learn about that. So you just say, I don't really know about that. I gotta be honest, I haven't heard that. And you might, if that's all they want to talk about, you say, hey, it's great to talk to you, thank you for talking with me. And always leave it with the gospel. Say, if you have a Bible, please read it. It'd be great. We're going to talk more about that next week. How to end a conversation with a win every time. So that's next week. There's a little teaser, so you come back. So it's okay. You don't have to lead every person you meet to Christ. Okay? It's like football. There's a lot of plays to get a touchdown. Everybody wants to be the person who catches in the end zone and spikes it on the ground. But you know what? It took a lot of plays to get there. And you know who was responsible for that touchdown? Every single player. The whole team, the coaches. But mostly it was the quarterback, TB12, right?
No.
Yeah.
It was Cooper Cup.
Cooper Cup was quite a beast this offseason. Yes, he was. Super Bowl MVP. And I still hate him. Even though he's a brother in Christ, I hate him. I remember I'm old enough to remember when Tim Tebow came to play the Patriots. He was playing for the, the rabbit tree. I'm gonna look at a shiny object. Do you know that if you write out the word daddy, the middle of that word is ADD. That's why I'm the way that I am. Think of it. Some of you homeschoolers are gonna wake up in the middle of the night, oh yeah, D-A-D-D what? ADD, I get it now. Okay, or you can figure it out right now if you want to. So, here comes So I remember when Tim Tebow was coming, he was playing for the Broncos, I think, and it was in the postseason, and so, one and done. If the Patriots lost, they're done. And so I said to my wife, I said, Shelby, I'm like, who are we gonna root for? I mean, I love Tim Tebow, he loves the Lord Jesus, it's awesome. I mean, I really want to root for him, but it's the Patriots, it's the beloved Patriots. I mean, who are we gonna root for? And my wife showed lots of wisdom and tact. Remember wisdom and tact? She said, here's what we do. We love Tim Tebow, we pray for him, and we pray that he has a great opportunity to show Christian humility in loss and disgrace. And that's what we pray for, and that's what happened. So yes, Mr. Cup there with the Rams, he's very impressive, and if he knows the Lord, great. But next time, if my Tommy comes out of retirement, I want him to be crushed. I don't care. All right. Where was I? So tell them you don't know the answer, and say, hey, let's talk again. Let's do that. That's a great way to do it. When you're talking with somebody, I want you to be thinking about, and if you need time to think about it, that's all the more reason to be asking questions like, what do you mean by that? How did you learn that? Can you give me evidence? Where did you learn that? How do you know that? Because those things will give you time to do this. Which way do you want the conversation to go? Do you want to convey new information to them? Well, the Bible, you can't trust the Bible because monks translated it in the 15th century during the Dark Ages. You might want to give them new information. You might want to say, well, have you considered that the modern translations that we have don't use 15th century manuscripts? We have manuscripts going all the way back to the 2nd and 3rd century. And we have some manuscripts go back to the 1st century. So even if a monk did change it in the 15th century, we don't translate based on that. Did you know that? So you can say that. That's giving new information. But you're saying, well, Mark, I don't know all that new information because I don't know everything about everything. That's fine. That comes in experience. You will. You guys are all smart. Every single one of you is intelligent.
If you talk to Mark long enough, you'll eventually know everything about everything.
There you go.
I agree with AJ.
No, Hannah, you are so on the negative. You have no idea. You're like in China. You're like on the other side of the world. You're in such a hole.
I did not know that. I was not aware of that. How did you come to that conclusion?
Because of snottiness. It just means that I love you. That's all it means. So sometimes you want to convey new information, and you guys will get more information as you guys get older. And I didn't mean that to sound like such a horrible. Like that doesn't sound like, oh, when you guys grow up. But seriously, you will. You'll learn. You guys are the type of people that read books and watch YouTube videos, and you're going to learn stuff. And so you will be able to convey new information. And if you can't, that's okay too. You don't have to know everything to be an ambassador for Christ. You just have to know the gospel in 3 seconds. Anybody remember the gospel in 3 seconds?
We broke the law, Jesus paid the fine, and rose from the dead.
Yes! We broke the law, Jesus paid the fine, and rose from the dead. And if you just know that, you're ahead of most people. So, but you might want to convey new information. Or you might want to expose a weakness. Well, you Christians, you say that God exists, but how come little kids get leukemia? So that's the problem of evil. They may not call it that, but that's basically what it is. And we're going to have a whole class on the problem of evil. But you might expose a weakness there and say, well let me ask something. I have a question. I'm trying to understand. You say you're an atheist, right? You don't believe in God. And one of the reasons you don't believe in God is because horrible things happen to little kids, right? And they go, that's right. And you go, but if atheism is true, then all we are is a bunch of molecules interacting with one another. We're no different than when a Mento drops into a Coca-Cola bottle. That's all we are. We're just chemical reactions. Why is leukemia wrong if we're just chemical reactions? I don't understand why. I understand why I think leukemia is wrong, because it creates death, and death is bad. In my Christianity, I see that death is bad. But if we're just chemical reactions, why is death bad? See, it's okay if you don't know how to do that yet. You will be able to do it. You're exposing a weakness. You're saying, look, you're complaining about evil, but according to what you believe, evil doesn't make sense. It's like standing on a table and yelling, there's no such thing as tables. Or it's like yelling out loud, I don't believe that words exist.
You don't?
Well, do I or not? I said I don't believe in words, but what did my actions illustrate? That I do believe in words, because I'm using them, right? And that's exposing a weakness. Don't worry, if you're not great at that yet, you'll get better at it. Don't worry about it. And it's okay. Just be there. If you even just open your mouth and ask the questions, what do you mean by that? Tell me how you learned that. You're looking kind, you're looking thoughtful, you're looking intelligent, you care about that person, you're standing up for Jesus. You're doing more than most Christians are going to do. So you're way ahead of the game. And as you get better at this, you'll get better at exposing weaknesses and conveying new information. So, D. How do we go on the offensive without being offensive? Anybody want to guess? I don't think it's in the notes, Mr. Smarty Pants. How?
Speaking calmly.
Speaking calmly? Sure, that's part of it, but not the right answer. It's part of it. Yeah?
Tactics.
Yeah, that actually kind of is the answer. Big surprise, we ask good questions. That's how we do it, by asking questions. That's how you go on the offensive without sounding offensive. Like when I say, hey, did you know that the Bibles that we have today don't come from manuscripts that went through monks? Would it surprise you to know that? I'm basically telling him that, but I'm doing it in the form of a question. It doesn't sound, I'm not steamrolling over him. I'm not saying you're a moron. I'm not saying, hey, dope. It's a way of being on the offensive, but it doesn't sound offensive. Now, I taught this in another class, and someone said, hey, this is good, not just in apologetics, this is good everywhere. And they're right. This is not, there's no place in the Bible that says to ask questions. Now, we see people doing that, especially our Lord Jesus, but everything that I'm teaching you last week and this week, most of it, you know what it is? It's just manners. It's good communication skills. Asking questions. Asking how people know what they know. asking more questions, bringing it out of them, letting them do the work, letting them hold the burden of proof. When they make a claim, let them give the evidence. This is true. You can use this with your spouse when you get married. You can use this with your children. You can use this with your parents. If you get in trouble for using it with your parents, send me an email so I can laugh. They say, Mr. Sohmer, I asked my parents, what do you mean by grounded? And boy, did I find out. Let me know that. Please let me know that. Because I will have a belly laugh on that.
I've definitely never done that.
I will do it. I know your mom. Give it a try.
I definitely haven't.
Give it a try. And so the master at asking questions is Lieutenant Columbo. If you've seen The Princess Bride, which I know you have because a bunch of you are really nerdy, he's the grandfather in The Princess Bride. But before that actor was the grandfather from The Princess Bride, he was Lieutenant Columbo. And I will let Greg Kokel, who wrote the book Tactics, explain Columbo and the genius that he has. So you and I hopefully can become more like Columbo all the time.
Now, this first tactic is one that I call the queen mother of all tactics. It's the tactic I use more than any other. It's a very, very effective tactic when combined with other tactics. It's the simplest tactic imaginable to stop a challenger in his tracks and to turn the tables and to get him thinking. It's an almost effortless way to put you in the driver's seat. And I call it the Columbo tactic. Now, you remember Lieutenant Columbo. You know, he's that detective on TV. He's got that certain way about himself. He's got this old trench coat he wears, you know, looks like he slept in it. Maybe he did. You know, he's got that stub of a cigar, right? And a little pad of paper. You know, but he's never got a pencil. He's always got to be digging around for his pencil. He can't find it anywhere. And he walks around the crime scene scratching his head, looking kind of stupid. I mean, this guy looks stupid, but he's stupid like a fox. He looks like he can't think his way out of a wet paper bag, but he's got a plan. And at some point, you'll see him. You know how he does that. He'll be walking around totally befuddled, scratching his head, thinking. And at some point, he stops, and he says something like this. I don't know. There's something about this thing that bothers me. Do you mind if I ask you a question? You know how he does that, right? And he gets his answer back. Oh, yeah, well, you're very intelligent. One more thing. And then he one more tings them to death, right? Question after question after question. And people get annoyed, and he says, I know I'm driving you crazy, but I can't help myself. It's a habit. And this is a habit that you ought to get into. The key to the Columbo tactic is using carefully selected questions to disarm the other person and to productively advance the conversation. Listen, if you don't know where to go in any particular circumstance, you find yourself stonewalled, just ask a question. Never make an assertion when a question will do. Don't start preaching at somebody right away. Try to find some way to advance your point by using questions instead. And with a little planning and a little practice, this can become second nature. Now, this approach offers tremendous advantages. Questions, for example, are interactive. They invite others to participate in what you have to say. Questions can make headway without even having you expose your point of view. You know, I encourage people who are at work and they're not allowed to witness, tell people about Christ or talk about religious things, that instead of talking about it themselves is just to ask the questions, because when you ask the questions, you're not stating your point of view. Questions also can serve to shift the burden of proof on the other person if they're making the claim. But most importantly, these questions, using the Columbo tactic, keeps you in the driver's seat. Now, some of you might know Hugh Hewitt. He's a national broadcaster, a conservative guy, great Christian guy, and a fine ambassador for Christ. And he's written a tremendous little book called In But Not Of. And it's got 60 or so chapters. They're all short vignettes that are meant to instruct you on how to be a more effective ambassador for Jesus Christ, essentially. And one of his chapters is entitled, Ask at least half a dozen questions in every conversation. Now, why does he say that? Because he knows that when you ask the questions The other person actually thinks you're kind of interesting and a good conversationalist. You're drawing them out, but they think you're the interesting one. Interested is interesting. But secondly, when you ask the questions, you are the one that is in control.
All right. So the Columbo tactic can be very, very useful because it disarms people. Now, you don't have to walk around with a disheveled, raincoat and a stubby cigar. I hope none of you have a stubby cigar. But, but the idea of and I kind of do this. When I talk to people, I'm like, okay, I just don't understand. Like you tell me, I just want to make sure I understand you. I say things like that, like I just want to make sure I understand you. You tell me that gender is a social construct. There's no such thing as a boy or a girl. It has nothing to do with your genitalia. It has nothing to do with your gender. So you told me that. But then you're telling me that 8-year-olds need to have surgery to change their genitalia. Like, I don't understand how that works. If your gender has nothing to do with your genitalia, then why are we pushing sex-changing operations on people, particularly little kids? See what I did there? I just asked a question. And I put it on that. Now that they have to explain the contradiction. I exposed a weakness. Because they said, gender doesn't matter, gender doesn't exist. Oh, by the way, this person has the wrong gender, and we need to surgically alter them because they have the wrong gender, even though gender doesn't exist. Exposing a weakness. Let's not scorn people who feel that way. Let's have compassion on people that feel that way. Seriously. I'm going to do a whole lecture on LGBT, and we should really have compassion and not make fun of it, believe me. It's awful. It's a horrible way to think. But that's what we do. We ask questions. We say, wow, okay, I don't understand. You say this, and how does that work with this? And it works you can become very good at that. And if you want to wear the trench coat and have a stubby cigar, get some pictures and email it to me because I'd love to see it. Okay, but the Columbo is smart. He's the smartest one in the room, but doesn't always act like it. So here are some examples of leading questions. So on page 19, you can fill these in. Here's a great leading question. Because now, what are the first two questions?
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that? And how do you come to that conclusion? So where you go next is the leading questions is, how about this one? Have you ever considered? I've used that one a couple times today. Where did I use that one? See if anybody's actually listening to me. Yes, sir.
In this class?
Yeah. No, back in my car. I want you to know what's in my car.
Now I can't remember.
Well, when I said, to the...
You're talking about the monks?
Yeah, with the monks, exactly. Thank you, favorite. There you go. You can have a happy cowboy.
That is so broken.
Happy cowboy is also a jolly rancher. Get it? Jolly rancher? Happy cowboy?
Use
Okay.
that one like first class.
Did I use that one already? Well, see, that's part of being a dad, is not only do I tell bad jokes, but I tell them over and over again.
This is the first time I actually understood it.
But, well, thank you for being honest. That's great. I love it. All right. That's great. Love the humility. Here, you can have a... Sorry. All right. Have you ever considered? That's a great question. Have you ever considered? Rather than telling somebody, hey, moron, we don't get our Bible from those manuscripts that went through the monk, you just say, have you considered this? It's a much nicer way of doing it. After what you told me, can I ask you a couple of questions? Ask somebody if you can ask them a couple of questions. I do this all the time. Especially when I say, do you think you're good enough to go to heaven? People say, yeah, I think so. And I say, do you mind if I ask you a couple questions? I've never, not once had someone say, no, you may not. No, they say, okay. And the questions that I ask them is, I'll tell you next week what I ask him. Oh, here's a very Columbo type of leading question. I'm a little confused. Could you help me understand why blah, blah? And you're not lying because, quite frankly, what a lot of people have to say is very confusing. People hold very contradictory ideas all the time. They don't even know it. So there are some examples of leading questions. Some more examples. Do you mind if I offered you an idea? It's very disarming. That's not harsh. It's my way of saying, hey, I want to tell you something that you didn't think of without me putting you on the defensive. You mind if I offer you an idea? And then the best question that you always want to aim for is, hey, would you consider yourself good enough to go to heaven? That's always a good one. How are we doing for time? You know what, guys? You are not going to believe this. I know. Is it okay if I tell you something amazing?
No, you may not.
I think I might end early. I'm looking at, this is like the last slide, I think, and it's 2:20. Wow. I know, crazy. All right. Maybe should I just like fill this out, like tell you stories about my life? Nah.
There's still another spot, so you can look at football sketches.
We can look at football sketches. We'll look at some Tom Brady highlights. Yes, sir.
By any chance, could you give us like a minute to write this down?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Good idea. Do I need to go back to the other one?
I think I got those.
Everybody got these three?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there another question?
Would you mind if I offer an idea? Oh, why? Is there too many little thingies? Are there more
There's
thingies?
one more.
Well, then I blame my friend Aaron who put this together because he did that. So you can
Make your own.
come up with your own leading question. Who wants to come up with a leading question that you think would be good?
Who?
Yes, sir.
Do you, like, sometimes, a good question I ask someone if I want to get into, like, a conversation about heaven and stuff is, do you believe that this was just created, or do you believe it would just evolve?
Yeah, that's a great one. Do you believe we were just, did we evolve or were we created? A good one is, what do you think happens after we die? I mean, that's a very specific leading question, but if you want like a more generic leading question that you can use in any conversation, there's a bunch of them. Yeah.
This is kind of similar to how do you come to that conclusion, but a lot of the things that a lot of the times I'll ask my friends, where did you find that evidence?
Where did you find that evidence? That's a great leading question. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that is, you're right, that is very similar to, number 2 of the top 2 ones that we start with. But it's okay, that's fine. Would you mind if I offer an idea? All those things. Can I tell you my story? Can I tell you what happened to me? Can I tell you how I learned? How I studied, what I learned? I mean, that's a good question. All of these things are great because they are ways of giving information without being pompous and difficult and, pushing. Now, I'm a Peter. You know Peter from the Bible. I mean, Peter, when people come to arrest his Lord, he doesn't think about it, he doesn't plan, he just jumps and starts chopping people's ears off. Peter's out in the ocean, he sees Jesus walking, he's like, can I go out there with you? I love people like Peter, because people like Peter are great, but people like Peter don't always think 2 steps ahead. We're not the best chess players in the world. My wife is not a Peter, my wife is more like a Luke. Luke is very methodical. He interviewed all kinds of people before he wrote his gospel, before he wrote the book of Acts. He, went to eyewitnesses. He definitely had a plan. He knew where he was going. He's a very good chess player. And you are going to be all of you are probably very much like Peter or like Luke or like somebody else. And that's great. God makes all kinds of different people. My point is, by asking these questions, it slows us pig-headed Peters down a little bit so we don't steamroll over people. Like, what do you mean you don't believe the Bible? You think, arr. That's what I'm apt to do. And by asking the questions, it slows me down. And maybe to the Lukes who want to make sure you have every duck in a row before you open your mouth, it's okay to open your mouth without having every duck in a row or having any ducks at all. And by asking the questions, that'll draw you out too, to help you gain some courage in the Lord to speak, and it'll be okay. So it's good. Everybody wins. Yeah, I saw a bunch of hands. What do you want? Yes?
So if you ask someone how they got to the conclusion, and then they give you evidence that is faulty or isn't true, how do you, without sounding offensive, question them into realizing that it's false?
Okay, so the question was, if you say, how did you come to learn that, and they give you evidence that doesn't work, how do you come to know that? Well, there's really at least 2 ways you can go with that. You could expose the weakness, or you could give them new information. And it's best if you do it through a question. So if someone says, well, don't you know the Bible was written, was rewritten during the Middle Ages by these, monks that were nefarious and all that, and they got rid of books that they didn't like, and they added books that they did like, and all that. You're listening, and you're like, boy, this guy's just making assertions. They're just saying stuff without evidence. So what you could say is, okay, wow, that's really interesting. I hear what you're saying. Do you mind if I ask you a couple questions? You know, and they're gonna go, okay, hey, did you know that, like, when I studied this, because I used to think, I didn't know where the Bible came from, but it actually comes from early manuscripts that are way before the monks. I mean, monks weren't, there was no such thing as monks until the Middle Ages, and the manuscripts that we have predate that by 1,000 years, at least. So, does that give you something to think about? How does that, now what do you think about that? Did that work for you?
Yes.
So see, I'm asking questions, but I'm poking a hole and I'm giving new information. I'm actually doing both. I'm giving new information and exposing a weakness at the same time. I'm doing it in the form of a question, so it doesn't come across pompous and, you know, like you're a moron and all that. Look, if you make somebody feel bad about themselves, okay, how do I say this? Jesus came to not win arguments, he came to win people. Now, by winning people, he did win arguments, obviously. But if we just win arguments, but we're jerks about it, and people think, well, that guy's a jerk, then you're not following the Great Commission. You know, we have to do it in a way to maintain people's dignity. Because even though, you know, they may be rude and they may be harsh, you know what? They're still made in God's image, and we're going to treat them with dignity. And we're going to love them, and they can have more metal in their face than I have in my Honda Odyssey. And they could be blasphemous, and they could be all that kind, and emo, and all. Hey, you like that? I said emo. I know your language. I'm pretty fly, aren't I?
Okay. Okay. You can be done.
Okay, I can be done. All right. But you know what? If we're jerky about it, then that's not right. That's not the way to do it. So let me wrap up. We start with you know, the big two questions. Someone says something, you're talking to somebody, first thing you say is,
What do you mean?
what do you mean by that? Or you could say, what do you mean by, and insert the thing. So what do you mean by God? Well, what do you mean by has been mistranslated? What do you mean by, so either one. And then, you listen to them. Oh, how did you come to that conclusion? That's really interesting. And then, where it goes from there is leading questions. Do you mind if I ask you a question? Like, hey, have you considered this? So you're taking it further. The first two questions, you know, what do you mean by that? How do you come to that conclusion? You can almost do that without even thinking. Like that can become like brainless. Your spinal cord can do that. But that's giving you time to think things through. Ooh, what do I want to do? There are two things that I probably want to do. I either want to expose a weakness or give new information. So you do that through the leading questions. And sometimes the leading questions send you right back to here again. You know, they might say something kind of ridiculous or an assertion or something, and you might have to go, oh, what do you mean by that? So you might have to spin around that circle a bunch of times. That's fine. That's fine. You don't have to, you know, win with a touchdown every time. It's okay. But hopefully, the goal, if we're doing it, well, I don't want to say if we're doing it right, because it's really not about us. But the goal, where we want to go with this, is we want to lead to gospel questions. We want to share the gospel. Remember the first week, the first time I met you guys, I said the point of apologetics is to answer objections. They're like, what were the objections like? Do you remember? I painted it. They're like stones in the way. And we want to get rid of those stones to share Christ. Because the gospel of Jesus Christ is what saves people. So we just want to get rid of those hurdles, get rid of those big stones out of the way to present someone to Christ. So how do we present Christ? How do we get to the gospel questions? How do we get to the questions that are going to lead someone to think about their eternal salvation? How do we get to the point where someone says, oh yeah, I guess I have sinned, and Jesus did pay the price. He died on the cross and he rose from the dead. How do we get to that point? And all of you guys want to know the answer to that. I know every single one of you is like, Mark, will you just stop building it up and just tell us the answer already? How do we do that? And I will.
Next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Yeah, you guys are too young to know what that means too. You're all a bunch of whippersnappers is what you are. That is. Good man. You're not just saying that, are you? All right. Hey guys, this is good stuff. You can do it. It's not as hard as you think, and you're smarter than you think. And I know that to be the case. Let me pray for you. Lord Jesus, thank you so much that you have called us to be ambassadors, and that's scary, but it's wonderful too. It's both.
And Lord, and you have all different types of ambassadors. We all have different personalities. Some of us steamroller and just want to get out there and chop people's ears off, and that's not right. And some of us want to make sure we know every little detail before we speak, and that's not right either. And Lord, so would you please take us to the next level where you could use us more effectively? And Lord, for everybody here, I pray for all the men and women here, and those who are watching online too, that you will use them for your kingdom, God. That you get all the glory and honor. That you would give us wisdom and tact, just like you did to Daniel. That you would use us for your kingdom purposes. That you would get pleasure out of us. That you would like it. I pray that you would bring people to us that we can talk to and we can ask good questions to, Lord. And I pray, God, that like the man at the beginning who got saved because a courageous woman was willing to ask good questions. I pray, God, that you would use us similarly. And I thank you so much for letting us come and learn. And we thank you and praise you in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, guys. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Awesome job. Hey, everybody. This is Mark. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please click like and subscribe to the channel. Please visit our website, luke-15.org. We have tons of free resources. Everything's free to help you to become a better, more effective ambassador for Jesus Christ. There's also information at luke-15.org about what my family and I do as missionaries here in New England and really everywhere through the internet. Please share these resources with other people you know through social media, and may God bless you as you take the gospel of Jesus Christ to the lost. We love Jesus. How can we not share him with others? Have a great day.